just take it for granted, because we know you have a lot of other things to do, but the mere fact that you have been able to be with us on this time, we definitely appreciate. For the last 2 weeks, one Friday we were not here, and we apologize for that, because there was another program that came, and it was a live broadcast, so we couldn't be here. I think that was the manifesto launch, so we couldn't be here because the NRM people were launching the manifesto week, and we had to give way for that broadcast. But today we are back, and I have a full house here with me. I have Ndugu Rugarama, but also after a long time, actually not a short one, I also have Ndugu Tuko, who has not been with us for quite some time. Today we'll be looking at some topic. Of course, in Ndugu Awich is not with us today. I'm told he traveled to the northern part of the country, and he had some engagements there, and I think he'll be traveling back to the city today. We are looking at the state of political parties in Africa. We may look specifically at the state of opposition, because when we're talking about political parties, we're talking about parties that are in power, but also the other political parties that are without power. Now, in Africa, we have the post-independence political parties that have survived, like the Chama cha Mapinduzi in Tanzania, and we have also parties that came later, like ANC, that have also, from the struggle, that have survived up to today. And then, of course, a few others have disappeared over the face of the world. After independence, we have the party of Mzee KK of Zambia. Now I think the common ones that are there are not the any political parties. We have the KANU of Kenya that have also disappeared. But so we are going to look at what happens then. These political parties, a necessity to the democratic development of Africa. Are they a liability, or do we still even need these political parties, or we can move without these political parties? So some of the things that we'll be looking at, and of course at a later time, we'll have a number on which you can send your views, and sometimes we appreciate your views, because there is a time we got a whole hour of discussion about the a report, a view that actually it was a feedback that was sent to us from Zimbabwe, talking about the future of Africa and why Africa is not able to take its issues seriously. So we had a whole discussion here about that, and of course we appreciate more of those that when you send us. So I think we'll begin from there, and Ndugu Rugarama, you're welcome. I'll begin with when we are talking about the political parties in Africa, what are we looking at, especially the opposition political parties in Africa? What do we need our viewer out there to understand?
Thank you very much, and good morning to our esteemed viewers. Like I always observe, after thanking the management of UBC, I take opportunity to thank our esteemed viewers for the time which they spend with us, because they would be doing other things. The political landscape on the African continent didn't start with the emergence of the political parties. When we historize the politics of Africa in particular, you will realize, for instance, that Africa was largely a continent, if you like, that had the political administration hinged around the institution of kingship and queenship. That even before the advent of colonialism, we had kingdoms. There were kingdoms, there were chiefdoms, some very few, of course, under the leadership of women, because it is also not true when you hear people say that Africa has not had respect for women. Far from it, because we had women that were heading groupings of people politically. So we start experiencing, and of course you can argue that maybe when we were under kingdoms and chiefdoms, as a continent, we were not so democratic. These conventional elites will argue, and they sometimes do argue, that we were primitive, we were not democratic, that the democracy therefore came with the white man. You ask yourself then, came with the white man when he did what? Brought Christianity, brought colonialism. So at the end of the day, of course, that's another big argument. So from there, we had the unfortunate, most scandalous historical event, which was the colonialism. But of course, we know that even before colonialism, direct colonialism, there was the aspect of slave trade, and still that was by the white man, and it was a form of administration, because they were administering those they thought they were better than in terms of thinking. And then from there, in between, we had the bringing in of Christianity, and all those were, of course, preparing the African man to a certain mode of political arrangement, different from what we were used to. So finally, we had the revolts. Now, majority of these revolts or civil uprisings by largely the African man, the Chumurenge Rebellion, the Nyanjere Rebellion, the Mau Mau Rebellion, the African National Congress, the resistances within the Ndeberes in Zimbabwe. You can, all were spread over on the African continent, led to the disruption of the white man's direct colonial rule. And we had, therefore, those rebellions crystallizing themselves into what you would call the political parties that brought the African man into leadership. So you will find that majority of the very first governments, on the African continent that went to Addis Ababa in 1963 to have the African Organization of African Unity, were those which fought to expel the direct colonialism of the white man and form government. Now, in between, the white man was not sleeping, and majority of those political parties or governments, if you like, faced resistance, internal resistance, either breakaways or just formation of parallel political organization. And majority of them were sponsored by the imperialist. The white man, who had pretended that he had left the African continent, was actually around, and he would manifest himself in and rebrand himself in creating divergent political parties which were not necessarily indigenous.
Okay.
So from there, we had, therefore, what you would call the opposition political parties, either from within the existing political parties that were forming government initially, or from without. And that is how you come to, for instance, the internal resistance and the overthrow either by use of the military or just political pressure in, say, Ghana, whereby Kwame Nkrumah lost power. Ben Bera lost power. Olympios lost power. You see, all those were the initial comrades that formed the government away from the colonial government.
Yes.
Then you had, of course, the likes of Patrice Lumumba, who basically had formed the initial government, also losing power out of the parallel political pressure that had been created and the infiltration within the army by the CIA and the Belgian government. So in a manner of speaking, therefore, that is how we come with we come up with the concept of opposition political parties, because in majority of the cases you will realize that the very resistance movements are the ones that formed government, the initial governments on the African continent, and finally maybe on this. As we progressed and the imperialist increased his fangs on the political horde of the African continent, then we started getting sponsorship of, increased sponsorship of the opposition political parties. We molded our political dispensation on the whims and wishes of the imperialists, so much so that in a country like, for instance, Zaire, former Zaire, Democratic Republic of Congo, we have got well over 190 political parties, some of them which are doing a lot of bidding for the white man. You go to a country probably now which we say is a beam of hope in Ghana, where you have got two main political parties. You come to Uganda, where we have got roughly like 20-something political parties. Some of them, I believe, we even don't know them. You go to, and majority of these political parties that I'm talking about, which are in opposition, you go to Kenya, where the original political parties have been either washed away deliberately or they have been merged, and some have been newly created, or for purposes of retaining or keeping power or undermining each other. You go to a country like Botswana, the Kamas have been in leadership for donkey years. It is just recently that they have just lost power. A man like Hakirima in Zambia was in opposition for a very long time and is, I think, one of the big guys that has been beaten for a very long time by under political pressure, and maybe finally you go to a country like Zimbabwe, ZANU-PF, which is actually the resistance that brought in the likes of Uncle Bob Robert Mugabe, is now still in power, but I think in a little bit of a watered down version. After the death of Robert Mugabe, then the attempt by the wife to take over.
Yeah, but now the problem comes in. I think we'll need to look at this. When we look at the political parties, the argument which is advanced in most cases, that political parties exist, especially the opposition political parties. First of all, the political parties exist for purpose of winning elections or forming governments or taking over governments. But the opposition also exists for purposes of checking the governments that are in power as checks. Now, we need, once we look at that, especially in the African context, opposition political parties actually checking governments in power. I think I will begin with Ndugu Otuko.
Well, thank you very much, Comrade Matuta.
Is any Arab being checked by the opposition?
Thank you. I will answer that subsequently. Well, I think Comrade Rugarama has given a very good foundation, a historical foundation of our political parties. And when you look at our history as African continent, you realize that most of the political party growth arose around 1960s, when there was between 1960s and 90, when there was a protest against the colonialism. Of course, some countries had already obtained independence, so it gave morale to other political parties or other countries to make formations. But also when you study those political parties at that time, they were issue-based. These were formed by different professional groups, the teachers' unions, the nurses' unions, and so many others, because they were advocating for very fundamental issues. And at that time, there were concerns that were arising, and the people coalesced around groupings that were existing in terms of associations. Now, departing away from that, because before 1960s, when you look at scan around the continent, you actually realize that some of the countries were under one-party system. But eventually, either perpetrated by the British, the colonial masters, the French, the British, and these ones that colonized DRC.
The Belgians.
The Belgians. So, but beyond 1990s, you see the growth of political parties departing from the traditional political parties, and this basically now brings a shift. Now, the shift is what I think Comrade Rugarama was trying to fundamentally explain by saying that the British actually did not leave. When the resistance in Africa grew and the political parties or political groupings at that time were able to succeed, the new approach had to be developed by the British, and that approach was through funding of political parties. And that's how you find political parties in Africa attached to the Soviet Union, political parties attached to the British, the Germans, and so many others. Their kind of governance system. And they were receiving their funding directly from these European countries. And they were meant to be used as political tools of continuing to perpetrate the Western agenda in the African continent. And I think that is now where we are.
Exactly.
Have the British and the French and the Belgians left the agenda of using political parties as a tool of continuing neocolonialism in Africa? And I think the answer is no. That is why today you find that every grouping that forms a political party will have to travel to the Western countries to make sure that they make their objectives and mission explained to them, so that they probably get funding and fundraising in those European countries. So I think when you say, are the political parties in Africa, for example, in Uganda, as you had put it, able to check government, I think the answer is yes and no.
Sure, yeah.
Yes, to some extent, they have been able to point out issues where we in NRM are not performing well. They have also been able, committees that are led by members of the opposition political parties have also pointed out areas where we are not doing well in terms of service delivery, in terms of abuse of office, in terms of corruption. Most of these cases have come through the committees led by opposition parties. But to a great extent, I think the idea of political parties today has shifted away from dealing with issues of governance to focusing more into self-aggrandizement, where individuals are now, once you use a political party in opposition to go to parliament, you have arrived. That is your mission, that's your objective, to use a political party as a vehicle. That's how you find individuals have shifted. We know MPs in this parliament of Uganda who have shifted from one political party to the other. When they realize this political party is not going to deliver them to parliament in opposition, they shift from DP to FDC, from FDC to NOP, from NOP to UPC, and so on and so forth. That now explains to you that the agenda of political parties is no longer about checking the government necessarily. It is now about how do I use this political party as a vehicle.
Exactly.
We also know individuals who left DP to join NOP, not necessarily because NOP had a better agenda, but because at that time the wave seemed to indicate that NOP was a vehicle that they could use to deliver them to Parliament. And once they have reached Parliament, NOP no longer becomes useful unless NOP again shows indicators that maybe they will be able to maintain the positions they have. That's when they will become remorseful. But we know that the agenda of political parties has completely shifted away from a pro-people agenda of ensuring that government is kept in check to ensuring that they have self-fulfillment.
Yeah, I wanted to join those two, the issue of the origins of the political system, the political parties, but also now the usefulness of these political parties as we speak today. And the basic example, he put it, I think we can look at the post-independence political parties and the oppositions, and then we see how those have been able to fare. Of course, where they have been strong, or they have remained strong, like we have seen the Chama cha Mapinduzi in Tanzania and a few others that have hung around. But we have seen those that came after the independence, including the one that came later, ANC, the problems that they're having. But Kenya also gives us another example where you find, well, now talking of the post-independence political parties not being there, we now have movements. When it comes to elections, you find three groups, could be ethnic, could be wherever, coming together to form a political party for purposes of winning an election. And sometimes after winning the election, then you realize cracks sometimes begin forming within those coalitions. We have seen the Kenya Kwanza, and you are seeing what is happening in that political party. We have seen even the Orange and the ODM, and we are seeing what is happening. Do we still believe that these formations are responsible for democratic the development on this continent?
No, what we need probably, I seek your intelligence here. What we need to look at critically is that, first of all, how did the political parties, and especially the political parties in opposition, and now, of course, after the over averagely 50 to 60 years of independence of Africa, do we still have the original independence, quote-unquote independence, political parties in power? Now, if the answer is no, then it means that almost all the political parties we have that have formed government are actual opposition political parties.
Yeah, that's
now,
the pretext.
Yes, because if we visit ZANU-PF and we say that was just one example, the opposition is the one in Zambia. The African National Congress virtually didn't manage to form government. They had to bring on board an opposition. So it's not purely ANC, an apartheid or independence political party.
So we see now the values of those political parties.
They have been wilted away. When you go to Tanzania and you look at Chama cha Mapinduzi, the crack that you are talking about, they actually suffered a crack when the former Prime Minister actually
denounced,
broke away, and he came close. Came close to winning election. And our colleagues in Tanzania would tell us that this time around we don't know what is going to happen to CCM. Now you come to Uganda, we don't have the NRM is not the independence political party. We know that for a fact. The only difference is that NRM came as a revolutionary political party, and the tenets upon which it was built, be it the 10-point program, now 15-point program, we could have even increased the points. They leave NRM in that arena of the political class of indigenous political parties, if you like, although we know that it is a movement and a revolutionary organization. So, therefore, what should disturb us this time around is that, largely speaking, the political space on the African continent is being controlled by who? If therefore, because one would argue that, you see, the opposition political parties, like for instance in Zambia, the political party of Hekirima, is giving us a very good breath of fresh air. Yes, one can argue, and probably without wanting to be cynical, I think there is something about Hekirima that we should be proud of. Because when you look at the rate at which he's fighting corruption, and I must admit that for us who have got a lot of sympathy for NRM, and probably by association or whatever we are members, we must admit that we are still having serious problems with corruption. We are not doing well here. There are other areas where we are doing well, no doubt about it. I don't have to be an NRM to appreciate the fact that we have got areas like in peace and security, like attempting to revamp the economy, like fighting discrimination and what have you, or on all forms. But corruption, this one of stealing government resources and what have you, no, we are not doing well. But you see, that notwithstanding, the fact that we have got political parties which, largely speaking, are a creation of the white man's interests. Because look at where we get the funding. My young brother Otuko here was talking about that whenever you see these political parties, they usually go to present their agendas to those who sponsor them. Truth be told, has it not struck you that even when we talk about, Chakwera is for where? Malawi.
Malawi,
Yeah, Malawi.
Since he came into power, he was being praised as one of the best breeds that has happened to the African continent. How has he transformed Malawi? And yet, look at the rate at which he was being praised. You go on the entire African continent, by the way, and you ask yourself, is it the issue of the political parties? Is it the issue of lack of democracy within the political parties? Even when a political party in the opposition takes over government, we seem not to get the question of economics right. Why? Is it within the DNA of the African person that we cannot lead our people to prosperity? We cannot lead our people to science and innovation. We cannot lead our people to skilling the entire country, and we cannot get the question of education correctly. There must be certain underlying factors that we have probably not interrogated very well, or those voices that come out to interrogate the issues that is happening in the political parties, be it parties in government, or even the political parties in opposition, which later on come and form government. Even those you say should be checking on those which are in government
Need to be checked.
are not doing properly.
The three countries you were talking about, Guinea, Mali, and the other country, when these guys took power, the one time they were asking one of them, which political party will you belong? They say no.
Okay.
Our problem is not the political parties.
Yes.
Our problem is to address the issues of our people, not necessarily.
Thank you very much.
belong to
Now,
political party.
that, I'm glad you have brought that one in that light. You see, the problem of Africa, if you asked me, I would tell you, of course, it is not one problem. Like Ngugi wa Thiong'o, Chinua Achebe said in one of his books that the problem of Africa is leadership. Now, our problem, among other problems that we have as Africans, is not having an independent mind. Every time we try to think, somebody has made it his business to interfere with our independent thinking, and we end up therefore doing things according to the blueprint of somebody else who is actually, in majority of the cases, not African. What happens therefore is this, that when you look at Africa, if we are looking at the lack of exploitation, indigenous exploitation of our own minerals, natural resources, poor education system, health not doing well, conflicts either between countries, balkanization of the continent, very low intra-trade. At I think we are now averaging about between 18 and 22, maybe around there, 25. The worst ever on planet Earth. That a country like what binds Morocco and Uganda, for instance, that there is virtually nothing. We don't trade at all. If an opportunity arises to pick a fight, there is nothing to lose, so we can fight. So therefore, when you look at the, for instance, in the three West African former ECOWAS countries that have now formed their own independent alliance, and what the majority of their leaders have come up to say, the truth of the matter is that our problem is not how many political parties we have, or how well a political party is, after all, under whose tenets are we judging the performance of a political party, not even our own tenets. Because when you have countries like France move out of the so-called French West Africa, they will say that leader is very bad because he has made a country that would be bringing in the so-called foreign exchange, and therefore the shelves, supermarkets are dry, water system is broken. The truth of the matter is that the African problems are very well known, and they have got almost very little to do with the political parties, be it in opposition, be it in government. Sometimes you even think that probably we are better off having an outright military dictatorship, but which has identified the problem of the people with microscopic exactness and are working on solving those particular problems.
Now, Otuko, building on that, because we're looking at the political issues. I mean, the political parties are not necessarily the issues, the solutions to the Africa's problems. Actually, to some extent, the political parties have also become part of the bigger problem of Africa. With or without political parties, can we survive?
Yes, I believe what Africa needs is not actually political parties. What Africa needs are better leaders, irrespective of how they are selected. After all, how were the Africans selecting their leaders before the white man came?
Leaders were not being selected, maybe.
We
had to fight to be on the top.
Which is okay. That was our system of democracy. If the fighting made you superior, it means we were led by warriors who are ready to defend us. So I think the system that leads us does not necessarily matter, whether it is a multi-party, whether it is through military, whether it is through selection, whether it's through kingdom. These were our systems as African people, and Africa was progressing to the right direction. It is only that we were betrayed by our own people who started collaborating with the white man. When you look at what is happening, for example, in Burkina Faso, which political party is in power? But you can see the progress of the economy of Burkina Faso. They have laid down a well-orchestrated plan on how to manage economic recovery, how to defend their country, how to increase production, how to expand the economy. But this is somebody who came to power through a military coup. The person who was there previously was elected, and he was elected with a popular vote.
On a political party ticket.
On a political party ticket. But the people were poor. There were bad roads. The economy was collapsing. So the question now is, will democracy, this is Western democracy, solve the African problem? And I think the answer is no. It takes me back to what Senior Rugarama is saying, that our biggest problem has been failure to develop our own system that our people can embrace. We think that when we are talking about democracy, we must have political parties like the Republicans, we must have political parties like the way the British have, but that is their democracy, that's not ours. We had systems that were able to run Africa to the right direction. Let me give an example. When President Yoweri Museveni came into power, he looked at the political parties that were formed at that time were either formed on the basis of religion. If you were Catholic, you had to belong to DP. If you were UPC, you had to belong to the Protestant. Now, those who did not belong to, I think the Muslims were also forming their own group. So in other words, we were divided according to the religion. And who brought the religion? It is the Western world. So there was that scramble to divide us on the basis of religious and gender chauvinism, and probably tribe. There are those at that time who believed for you to be a soldier, you must be from a certain region. You must be of a certain height. If you are short from Kasese, you do not qualify to be a soldier. And that's why the people in the north and eastern part of the country dominated the military at that time. Whose agenda was this? This was also orchestrated by the political groupings that were championing the neo-colonial agenda post-independence. So the issue of political parties, in my view, may not necessarily be the answer to the progress of the African people, unless we redefine what a political party must do and what it should be. When you look at NRM 1986, 1986 to around 96, about 10 years of NRM, we never had political parties. We only had the movement system, and it was a system of governance. The movement was not a political party. We had people who had different views. We had Mao, we had the likes of Dong Ato belonging to this movement system. The likes of Elias Lukwago were cadres who were trained and shown what direction the country was going, because he was a graduate of Chankwanzi. So you realize that at that time, everybody knew what direction the country would go at that time. The 10 years of progress of the movement system clearly indicated that actually the problem of Uganda would not necessarily be solved by political parties. It needed the correct analysis and prescription of the challenges the people were facing. And I think the movement system provided that platform, where people would criticize things that they were able to disagree with, but while belonging into that system that allowed them to criticize the system internally. Unfortunately, of course, because of the Western pressure and globalization, we succumbed to this pressure, and I think that was the mistake by NRM.
Yeah, because...
I think we should have stuck to our system because it was very unique. Many people in Africa were coming to Uganda to learn about this. Others were calling it a one-party system, but it was not, because it had individuals who disagreed with it inside, and you had people who were elected on merit. and the best leaders this country has ever had under this system of NRM have existed between 1986 and 1996. Today, we are electing anyone because we belong to political parties. Me as NRM, if somebody is belonging to my political party, the group politics requires that I must support that person, even when I know he is not very competent. So I think these political parties have run down our party system, have run down our politics, because the quality of leaders has actually gone down.
Yeah, to the extent that Ndugu Rugarama was talking about, that a lot has happened, that even when we are talking about post-independence political parties, a lot of surgery has happened to them, and they are no longer the same political parties that used to be. Of course, you gave the example of ANC, because now when you look at ANC, there are two different values. There is the pure ANC who believed and who struggled against apartheid, and then there also the other alliance now they have is the party that was pressing them, that was pushing for the still promotion of the white supremacy, but now they are together. So the ANC of then is not the ANC of today. And I also believe that most of the political parties, including the NRM of 1988 or thereafter, is not the NRM of today.
No, maybe some just of information. 1 minute here. That you are bringing in a very, very important point, and I wouldn't want us to lose it. Throughout the African continent, majority of these political parties, by the way, they have been battered left and right. And indeed, you even the Chama Cha Mapinduzi that we are talking about, look at the Chama Cha Mapinduzi of the Julius Nyerere's, even later on, the subsequent leaders that came through, and look at the Chama Cha Mapinduzi now. And you ask yourself, what has exactly happened to the CCM that we used to know? Who has infiltrated it? At one time, I think even Mwalimu Julius Nyerere, may his soul rest in eternal peace, was talking about the hypocrisy of the white man, and he said that I have been reminded that there is a dictatorship in CCM simply because it is the one that keeps bringing in presidents. That in order for democracy to be witnessed in Tanzania, there has got to be other political parties also bringing in what? Presidents. Now, hypocrisy indeed. Why do I say so? I agree with those who have diagonized the politics of Africa, and I have come to a conclusion that it is just hypocrisy of the white man when they look at the African continent and view it in terms of few political parties or no political parties at all. Your NRM, our NRM, suffered what it suffered simply because it was a unique system. The white man does not like unique things. Cuba must be under sanctions simply because they have got a unique system of leadership. They must not have that. Even, by the way, look at what is happening in Venezuela. What is happening in Venezuela is basically is even multi-party dispensation. But still, it is not being, the winning candidate is always coming from with that view which is looked at as socialist. It is not the far right. And therefore, that must also not be looked at as democracy. So at the end of the day, you ask yourself, our own teachers, the exporters of democracy to us, the preachers, what is their own brand of democracy that we should actually copy? Do they have the 200 and something political parties that they have in DRC? They only have 2. And even in America, for instance, when you look at the 2 that they have, even when there are other political parties, but as when we were moving, like for instance, in the recently concluded presidential elections, it was either Democrat or Republican. But I want to borrow the words of El Comandante Fidel Castro in 1960 when he was asked to differentiate between the Republican and the Democrat. And he said, why do you ask obvious questions? There is no difference. One, a Republican, is a far Zionist, hardcore Zionist Jew who believes in the who believes in keeping the Zionist regime or view of looking at politics in America and elsewhere, and the Democrat is a little bit watered version. It is the same person wearing the same shoes, but a little bit different. But at the end of the day, the truth of the matter is that they are all the same. But when they come here on the African continent, they want you to create a situation whereby you have to appear that you are actually radically different, including you being armed to fight each other if it comes to that.
We'll look, I think because of time, we'll have more time to share on this subject, and we'll also ask people from out there to get us their views. But do we believe now, or given this, that political parties, opposition parties are not a solution to Africa's problems?
No, they are not. Are these by concluding remarks?
Yeah.
The truth of the matter is that Africa's problem is what has been bestowed upon her by the macro economic policies of the IMF and the World Bank, and the globalization impact. It has got nothing to do with the political parties, because I do not believe that the political parties are, be it opposition or otherwise, are a benchmark, or they actually amount to creating democracy, because wherever they have existed, as long as they are molded on the white man's way of looking at democracy, they will never be a solution, not to our political question, but also questions in other areas.
Ndugu Watuku.
Well, I think, as I said before, the African problem is founded on the needs of the people. And irrespective of which vehicle we shall use to provide us leaders who will answer the fundamental questions of the people, the social transformation of the people, the infrastructure development, the economy, I do not see political parties as the only vehicle that can deliver us there. It may actually be, that is, if we organize our political parties around issues. I'll give you an example. I want to use local examples. There was a project of water in a sub-county called Gweri in Soroti, which was brought by, I think, Ministry of Water. It was a project which had a timeline, and they wanted to do piped water to transform a borehole into piped water through a solar-powered system. One of the LOC3s who happened to be an opposition person in that sub-county at that time, I think he's now an MP, that gentleman is now an MP, incited the population and said they should not allow the powering of that borehole because it seems government has discovered the oil inside the borehole, and now they are masquerading that they want to pump water.
Maybe that's what
the community was mobilized, and the project was taken back.
And he was
Till
elected
today,
MP.
there is no piped water, and he was elected MP.
So maybe that was the need of the population.
We have individuals who think being in opposition is actually opposing development. They do not know that the role of leaders, whether in government or in opposition, is to contribute to the development and the transformation of the people. Because at one time, NRM may not be in power. It may be a different political party. But
even NRM is also opposition, because that's the beginning.
Well, you cannot tell what the future is, but the point I'm making is that when you are in opposition, you must be aware that your contribution to the country is very important.
Yeah, because you're a leader.
It is as important as those in government, because we have a duty to make a contribution to the development of Uganda as a country, but Africa as a continent.
Next time we come here, we'll be looking at these types of political parties and the opposition political parties, their roles and the benefits that they can, working together with the governments, bring. Whether it is being in opposition, like you have said, means that everything that the government does is wrong and I need to undermine it. Yeah. Or being in opposition or in a political party, you are also part of that government. Yes. And we'll look at that, especially with the Ugandan experience, to see what it means, because some of the people who are talking about government are also part of government. They're even earning from government. So next week or next Friday we shall be looking at that and looking at more towards the specific examples of how the political systems have been able either to work or fail on this beautiful continent of Africa. Until then, and on behalf of my panelists, I thank you having been with us for all this long, and also thank the technical team that has been behind the production of this program. Until then, have a nice weekend, and we thank you and wish you the best of it. Thank you.
Thank you.
UBC, inspiring Uganda.